Yeah, Kyle, there's a little more accountability here than I thought. I thought I'd get out here and maybe not know a lot of people, but there's some of them that have known me for a long time, one guy in specific. But anyway, Kyle, thanks to you and the board for having me. I got to meet some of the board members yesterday at lunch, and we prayed for a while. And, you know, like one of them said, we're all family, we're all brothers in Christ, and it was nice to meet them. And it didn't take long for us to bond yesterday. But anyway, there's three things I want to mention first. The first thing, which is really important, is I don't do this very often. So public speaking is not my gift, and it's going to be very obvious here pretty quick that that's the case, okay? So I want to get that on the table. Secondly, you know, and we'll get into my story, but, you know, my story is really the story of many. I celebrated my 45th wedding anniversary last couple of weeks ago. Got a wonderful wife in Fort Worth, and she's been a support to me for a long time. So, you know, she's had a big part in this too. She's not here today, but I wanted to say that. And then, you know, I've got a little bit of accountability with Houston here, so I've got family here. I've got 3 kids. Houston's the youngest. I have a daughter her name's Lindsay, and a son named Parker, and then Houston. And then I've had, you know, in my career, I've had mentors, I've had Sunday school teachers, I've had pastors, I've had investors, I've had partners, I've had the ability to work with some really wonderful people. And so there's a lot of people that could share in what I'm going to say today. So I wanted to kind of get that out. And then thirdly, I wanted to start off today by quoting Psalm 115:1 that says, "Not to us, Lord, not to us, but to your name be the glory because of your love and your faithfulness." And so whatever I say today, however bad I do it or good I do it, whatever I've accomplished, whatever God's blessed me, it's been his love and his faithfulness. So I want to get that out too. I want to say that first thing. And so what I told Kyle I would do is just basically kind of share my story and then kind of share some things that I've learned through my life, through my career. And, you know, I'm going to do that by kind of giving some key dates as I move along. And I'm really going to spend a little bit more time on some early days versus some recent days. And so, but I wanted to start, and we're going to get into some blessing. We're going to get into some hardship. We're going to get into some trials, but I consider them all blessings. And I wanted to start out by sharing. Many of you know the verse, but it's Romans 8:28, and we know in all things God works for the good for those who love Him and are called according to His purpose. And I want to point out a couple of words there, and the one word's a small word, but it's a big word, and it's all. So everything I feel like that's happened in my life is part of God's plan, and hopefully as we get through part of this, you'll be able to see there's been trials and struggles, and then God grows you and prepares you for something else. So anyway, I want to start with that verse. And so I was born in the great metropolis of Electra, Texas. I don't know if any of you ever heard of Electra, Texas, but it's 30 miles west of Wichita Falls. It's a little oil field town, or was a little oil field town west of Wichita Falls, and it's right on the edge of the Wagner Ranch. But anyway, that's where I was born, and I'm 64. I was born in 1957. And the first significant date I wanted to mention to you guys today is January the 8th, 1968. And on that day, what was different about that day was on that day, my mom picked up my brother and myself and my sister. I remember very plainly, it was the first day after Christmas break. And what was different about that day, as she picked us up from school, we took off in the car, and she said, "Well, I need to tell you something." She says, you know, we're moving to Wichita Falls, and we lived in Electra, which is 30 miles. And she said, "You know, your dad and I have decided that we can't live together anymore, and we're going to get a divorce, and we're moving to Wichita Falls." So that was a big day in my life, you know, and you know, there was a lot of struggles surrounding that for a number of years, and my brother and I handled it a little bit better than my sister. But you know, I want to keep going back to all things. And so, and God's big plan as we moved to Wichita Falls, and she was a school teacher. she started taking us to a small Baptist church. And the only time I'd really been to church, I was 10 at the time. The only time I'd ever been to church was really for Christmas or Easter. So she took us to this little Baptist church on the north side of Wichita Falls and had about 70 people in it. And what happened that next year is as a 10-year-old boy, I walked the aisle and gave my life to Christ. And, John 3:16 says, "For Christ so loved the world, he gave his only begotten Son, who should believe shall have eternal life." And so that was a decision that really changed my life forever and is still changing my life. And so I was pretty involved in the youth group there and was a disciple there through that small church. And my dad, he still lived in Electra when we lived in Wichita Falls. He got custody, or he got every other Saturday morning. He picked us up at 6 o'clock and then delivered us back on Sunday afternoon. And so, as Kyle mentioned, he was a pumper for a small company there on the Wagner Ranch. And so what we'd do, we'd go back to Electra, and he'd drop my sister at my grandparents, and so I would go make his leases with him. So, I grew up making the leases with him. So we did that as growing up, and so I kind of grew up in the oil field, and during that time, my grandfather introduced me to the game of golf. And some of you that know me, I'm kind of involved in golf a little bit, and actually God's used that He's used that game I've done a lot of business and done a lot of things on the golf course. So anyway, fast forward to November the 26th, 1976. So I'm 19 and end up marrying my high school sweetheart. Her name is Donna. We met in junior high, and we decided to get married and had $400 in the bank. And I kind of say I felt like we both had to grow up pretty fast because, my parents were divorced. My sister got in a lot of trouble, and so I had to kind of grow up. And then she was the oldest of 4 kids, and basically grew up her dad had some alcohol problems. So we were 19, but we both had to grow up fast because she basically had to raise her brothers. So anyway, once my dad told me I got married, he said, you're on your own. He said, I'll help you with your tuition a little bit. And at the time I was going to Midwestern State University in Wichita Falls, and I think the tuition was like $400 for one semester, a little different than today. So he did help me with my college expenses. So what I did is I went to school full time. And some of you guys are too young to know about CB radios, but basically worked in a CB shop part time and put CB radios in 8-track stereos, install stereos. So that's what I did to get through school. And Donna she forfeited going to college and went to work directly just to help us get by. And our first apartment was really nice. It was 3 rooms. The rent was $150 a month, utilities included. And in the summer we had one window air conditioner unit. You couldn't watch TV and run the air conditioner at the same time because the screen would go from like this down to this if you ran the air conditioner. So anyway, those first few years were hard, and actually, I'd kind of gotten away from the Lord. I mean, I was real active growing up in the youth group in high school, and between school and working and trying to be married, I kind of got away from the Lord a little bit at that time. And so my next kind of significant date is April the 10th, 1979. And for those that live in Wichita Falls, that's called Terrible Tuesday. And we had a huge tornado blow through. And I was actually talking to my dad on the phone. At the time, he had moved to Vernon, and there was a tornado that had hit up there. And I was talking to him on the phone, and I said, "Are you okay?" And he said, "Yeah, we're fine." And so while I'm talking to him on the phone, the sirens go off. And we just moved into a 2-story apartment, and I said, "Well, I hear the sirens go off. I better get off the phone and check it out." And so we, in my great wisdom, I told Donna, I said, "Let's just get in the truck and leave." And so tornadoes most of the time travel northeast. So we get out on the main road, and we can actually, we lived right across the street from the football stadium. We could see a big black cloud on the other side. So it was knew it was coming kind of in our direction. So I kind of went due east, thinking if I went east, it would go northeast and would miss it. So I'm headed east and kind of keep looking in my rearview mirror, and it ain't going northeast, okay? It's going east. And so we basically outran it for like 2 or 3 miles. And then we came to a traffic light, and traffic started stacking up. And I'd noticed when I went by a street, there was a side street that had a cement culvert on the side, a cement ditch over a bridge. My friend Dale's here. It's at McNeil and Southwest Parkway. Anyway, I jumped the median and basically started right back in the path of the tornado. And God had given us a piece. We pull over, we crawl on this ditch, and within about a minute or two, you hear all this exploding, and it's really like a freight train. So it went right over the top of us, Moved my truck about 100 yards down the street. So anyway, totaled my truck, went back to my apartment. Our apartment was leveled, and we basically lost everything. And so we had to move in with my mom, and we moved in with her for a while. And I have an accounting degree, but I haven't done much accounting, I will tell you that. So, and I was scheduled to set for the CPA in May, in April, and I was supposed to graduate in May. Well, I never set for the CPA, just too much going on. I did graduate though in May, and I have a comment. There's no need to discuss what honors I graduated with, okay? So I don't even know what you call it, magna cum or whatever, but I will tell you guys that are C students, there's hope for you in here. So anyway, but as a result of that tornado, I felt like that God was, I really had a peace about him. I didn't get scared. It was like, and so I really felt after that I needed to get back in church and get back with the Lord. And so I actually started watching church on TV and started watching First Baptist Church here in Wichita Falls. And our little church had 70 people, and I told Dawn, I said, I feel like we need to go down there and visit First Baptist. She said, there's no way I'm going down there. I'm not going to go down there with all those people and too many people. And so I said, well, no, we really need to go. So we visited, and that was right after the tornado. And so God used that church and the men in that church and the pastor in that church to forever change my life. We were there for 25 years. And anyway, it was a God took the tornado, he led us to that church. And so in all things, I'll keep wanting to share that. And during my last year of school, I kind of graduated from putting in CB radios. And some of y'all know the Cobra Oil and Gas Company out here, the Dillard family in Wichita Falls. They were like the biggest family and biggest oil company in Wichita Falls. And I'd actually met Jeff and his dad through junior golf. And through that relationship, I was able to get a part-time job at Cobra, and so I was actually, my last year of college, I was working at Cobra, and then got a job there when I graduated. So let's move to summer of 1980. And two big things happened that year. First of all, Donna was pregnant, and we had her first miscarriage. She had a miscarriage, which some of you guys, I don't know if y'all been through that, but her goal in life was to be a mother, and that's all she wanted to be. And that was really hard. And then, we got through that, and then that same year, my grandfather had a heart attack. And so my dad and grandfather worked for themselves, and they had about 80 stripper wells on the Wagner Ranch, and they had them divided into 2 areas. My dad looked after part of them, my grandfather looked after part of them. And so, so my comment here is, so my dad came to me and said, look, would you like to go to work for us? And I said, okay, because I was the oldest of 10 grandkids and had been around the oil field and loved being outside. But, so I've got this really good job at Cobra, which is established and going to be there a while. And I said, okay, how's it work? And so I said, well, you're going to be contract. And I said, well, what does that mean? That means that we're going to pay you $2,000 a month. And you're going to furnish your truck, your fuel expenses, your own insurance, and basically no benefits. And I said, okay. And so the decision I had to make was to either I was offered that position or I was offered the future with Cobra, which probably wouldn't have been a very bright future if they'd have figured out how well I did in counting. But anyway, I knew the owner. But anyway, I thought about a bright future going forward with Cobra. So anyway, people are always looking for God's will in their life. And I think that, they're looking for sometimes an audible voice or maybe a letter in the mail. Well, that's not going to happen. And for me, and what I've learned as a pretty young man, and even as later, is that, if you're in the Word and you're spending time in fellowship, you're spending time in prayer, God's desires kind of become your desires. And so, as a result of that, I took the pumping job. Okay, so I gave up the security. Felt like God was leading me to do that. And my job with them is I had to stay as long as work was needed. I'd made my wells, and we did roustabouting, and we had a winch truck, and we drove around, moved little pumping units around. But I had to stay as long as there was something to do. And so as there wasn't something that at noon or whenever I got finished, I was kind of free to go do what I wanted to do. And as a result of the tornado and me being at First Baptist, me being in the newly worded class, I met a geologist named Dan Mallory, and we started prospecting together, putting leases together. And so some days I had to work all day in the field, and other days I got to come home. And most of you guys know that if you read the Old Testament, that God sent Moses to the wilderness for 40 years. Well, he sent me to the wilderness for 10 years because we started drilling Tanny Hill wells on the eastern shelf. And if you know anything about that, I don't know the worst place to start an exploration program by chasing channels that go like this and are about 100 foot wide. But anyway, we found a couple of fields and kind of banged around and survived for about 10 years. And I actually had an investor that every time when we'd go to lunch, and there wasn't a lot of homeless people in Wichita Falls, but if we saw one, he'd say, I guarantee you that guy's a Tanny Hill geologist at some point in his life. So he had a lot of wit about him. But anyway, so we're doing that. And the three really positive things that happened in the 80s was that Lindsay was born, Parker was born, and Houston were born. So they were all born in the 80s. So let's move to April the 26th, 1990. Like I said, God had continued to bless, and we got by, but at the time I'd been married for 14 years, had 3 kids, and still doing what I was doing, still pumping my wells and putting drilling to get deals together. And I don't know, I'm a Proverbs guy. So there's 31 Proverbs. I don't know when I started, but I know I've been doing it for probably 30 years. I don't know if anybody does it in here, but every day I read a proverb. And there's so much in Proverbs about life. Proverbs 3 talks about trusting the Lord with all their ways, and acknowledge Him in all things. He will make your paths. Well, I don't know exactly when I started, but I was reading Proverbs, and it's really a manual how to do business, how to do life. And also, I want to point out here that early on in our marriage, even after this contract and all the netting out everything I had, with my contract pumping, God put on our heart to tithe, and it was never a problem for us. And so we tithed as a young couple, and Luke 16:10 says, whoever can be trusted with little can be trusted with much. And so we've never had a problem with tithing. So in 1990, a lot of you guys probably know the Marshall Winston group here in Midland, and Tom Brandt I knew from these days. Well, Marshall and Winston had made a discovery in Concho County in the King's Sand. I don't know if any of y'all are aware or know anything about it, but they made a discovery in '89 there, and it was a shallow. When I mean shallow, it's like 1,800 feet deep, and the production was tremendous. And we had a friend of the geologist I was working with called him and said, "Hey, look," he said, they made this big discovery down here. You guys need to start looking around down here. And so through that relationship, we started trying to put some acreage together. And I basically had zero. And we got some kind of old time, hard-headed, crusty old Wichita Fall partners to put up some money. And we put together a large AMI down in Concho County. And, I could spend first of all, first well we drilled was dry. And the second well, I could spend 30 minutes on talking about all the things that God worked out to make that deal happen. But we acquired this lease, back in the old days, we used to pay bank drafts. You guys don't do that anymore, but we paid a bank draft for this lease at Tyndall 2 and took this lease. And anyway, we started drilling this well. And so on April 26, 1990, at about 10:50, I was driving back from pumping my wells. I got a call from my partner Dan and says, "Look, David's we just cut 15 foot of sand, and we got great shows, and maybe we have something." And so after being in the wilderness for 10 years, I'd been enough ups and downs that we'd done hit it the mother load so many times, and we hadn't. So I said, "Well, you never know." And so I said, "Well, that's great." So that afternoon we loaded up and we drove down to the Concho County, which is kind of east of San Angelo, south of Abilene, and sure enough, we had 26 feet of beautiful king sand, and later that year I quit my pumping job and went out on my own. So let's move to 2000. 2000, we spent about the remainder of the 90s looking for another king sand field. We never found another king sand field. But for those that are a little older like myself, 98, 99 was another oil crash. And so that 98 to 2000 was probably the hardest 3 years of my life. And by God's grace and God's favor, I survived financially, and it was the time that my wife and I went through a really hard time. The price of oil was down, and it was also a time that I had tried to get the guys I worked with, my partners, I tried to get them. We kind of started out you think this shale drilling's wildcatting. We wildcatted. It was wild. And I tried to get them to, over a period of years, to basically change our direction. I couldn't get them to do it because we basically lost our investor base. I said, "Look, guys, we got to, anyway, I couldn't get them to do it." And so I finally came in and said, "Look, I think we need to split up. I said, look, we can office together to survive because we needed each other to survive and share office space. But I said, I'm going to go a different road." And so, in all things, I'm having financial trouble, I'm having marriage trouble, I'm having partner trouble. I get a call from a banker that I did some business with, and there's a thing that started in Fort Worth called the Barnett Shale. And so, through God's grace and mercy, we made it through those first few years. And like I said, I wasn't broke, but I was just about broke. And, at Pfluger lease, the lease we found in Concho kept us alive. And I mentioned earlier that I worked for Cobra, and Jeff Dillard, who runs Cobra now, I continue to be friends with him, and had a good relationship with him, and I tried to show them some deals in the past, but it was never big enough for them, and my stuff was always too small and probably too risky for them and too wild. But I said, I've got a chance to pick up some Barnett acreage. Would y'all like to participate? And he said, "Well, it's funny you ask." He said, "My dad has been talking to me, and he thinks that he wants to get in the Barnett." And I said, well, great. And so anyway, I put a deal together there. We picked up 2,000 acres, and I paid $52 an acre for my Barnett, which at the time there was probably, I think there had been 5 vertical Barnett wells drilled, and George Mitchell's the one that figured all that out. But anyway, it was that early, and it was just, I had no clue. I was running to something that was not running, but something that was lower risk. I was looking for something that was, we played around, as one of my partners said, "I'm tired of playing the ring around the rosy." You make a Tannehill discovery and you drill 5 dry holes around trying to stay in the channel. So anyway, it was very early. And, through my relationship with Jeff, we put that deal together. And so I'm going to talk a little bit about kind of what's happened really on the positive side, but then I want to get into some things that just are really important to me. And I know I'm kind of going fast and probably rambling, but you know, the first Barnett position that we put together was basically, we put together about 15,000 acres, and I basically leased all that myself. And I didn't even have a land, we didn't have a land group checking title and trying to get leases. I just started getting in the field, and anyway, most of our stuff was referral. And so it ended up being, you know, it started out vertically and then soon after turned to horizontal. And I had an original set group of investors, and we'd drill 4 or 5 wells, and then they would say, look, I think this is good, but there wasn't a lot of infrastructure, and so we didn't have wells on. And so, anyway, I ended up having 150 private investors in that package. And so in 2005, Encana came to us and wanted to know if they could buy us. And so, but they said, well, look, we got to get 70% of the interest. We don't want all these people. And I said, okay, let's work towards that. And so I'm going to kind of speed through a couple transactions. So in 05, we sold Encana for $200 million. And then we started up again. And so in 2008, we sold XTO. Timing is everything, but I know who's in control of the time. I mean, God's in control of the time. Anyway, we sold XTO in 08, signed our PSA, gas was $13, and then the world fell apart. If it hadn't been XTO in God's favor, we would never close that deal. So in 2008, in October, we sold XTO for $800 million. And then in 2009, the guys I was working with said, guys, I'm tired, I'm going to take a break. And they said, we want to keep going. So we formed Titan and paid $30,000 for some acreage, which was not good timing. And really the wells that we were drilling in the team we had were really good. It's just gas went from 13 to 2, and it doesn't work. So, which was Apollo backed at the time. And so I got my introduction to private equity. And I was kind of the non-exec chairman. I really wasn't involved. I kind of just played golf that year. But anyway, it was, later on, we merged that with Atlas. So that was a loser. So they're not all winners. So in 2011, I've kind of retired 3 times. And I really feel like I don't think retirement's in the Bible. And I think I'm probably going to slow down, and I got a new title last week. It's called co-CEO, and I'll talk about that in a little bit. But anyway, I've kind of retired 3 times. But so in 2011, we formed Veritas Energy, which for you guys that are Latin guys, Veritas in Latin means truth, okay? There's only one truth, and that is Jesus, and Jesus loves you. That's the real truth. But we make a big deal about in our company about being honest and having integrity, and there's tons of proverbs that talk about that. So anyway, we founded Veritas in 2011. You'd think by then, you know, man, we're smart. We're going to just, anywhere we go, it's going to work. It's going to happen. Well, we go to the Mississippi Line play up in Oklahoma. If any of you have been up there, I get these texts. Somehow I'm on this Mississippi Line notification on my phone, and every now and again, and I don't want anything to do with the Mississippi Line anymore. Okay, it was a disaster, a 55,000 acre disaster. So anyway, we got in that play, it didn't work. We got in the Marbles Falls play, which is in the Fort Worth Basin north of Fort Worth, and I thought we could take some of the horizontal frac techniques to some of the conventional plays. Well, it didn't work. I mean, we did get our money back there. We sold that in 2012 to Brigadier. And then in 2000, in that same time frame, is when Houston, we met the Double Eagle guys, John and Cody, and ended up putting a position together with them. And you know, you think by then I'd be getting. Anyway, we sold it to Athlon about a year ahead of. Anyway, at the time when we did sell it and it worked out, but a year later it's worth a lot more money. So 2014 was a time when we had some serious. I have 3 kids, you know, so you guys got kids. Anyway, 2014 was a really hard time in our family with one of our kids, and really hard time. And anyway, it's not Houston. He stepped up and kind of helped run Veritas at a time when I wasn't worth much. But anyway, God got us through that. And later that year, we formed Veritas Permian, which is another private equity back that we did with Post Oak Energy out of Houston. and we started our Double Eagle 2, or started a deal with Don and Cody and Veritas Permian. We ended up merging into with Double Eagle and formed Double Eagle Energy Permian and sold that in 17 for $2.8 billion. And I really want to move anyway. So we did that, and anyway, when we merged, all our employees went to Double Eagle, including Houston. I was the only one that technically didn't go. And actually, they moved Grant's Tumbleweed to my office and moved all the Veritas peoples to Double Eagle's office. And so I was kind of just trying to figure out what I was going to do. And so we started doing this non-op deal on the side. And then later on, after the sale, I got all the Veritas employees back except Houston. He stayed at Double Eagle. And a guy named Steve Fitzgerald joined me, and we put together 32,000 acres in the Marmaton up in the Panhandle. There was a horizontal play going up there, and we put that together. And before we ever drilled a well, Mubrin was up there drilling some wells, and they called us about wanting to make a trade on some of the sections. And I said, by then I have some very conservative engineers and geologists that work for me, and Mubrin had drilled a few more wells, and they were getting nervous. And so I said, well, why don't, they said they want to trade a couple sections. I said, well, why don't you just trade us our 24,000 operated acres for 1,200 acres in the Lee and Eddy County in your non-op wells and some wells. And I said, I understand it's not going to be acre for acre, because we were paying $200 an acre in the Panhandle, and I don't know what. I think that they had that federal sale in Lee or Eddy County that Matador paid $98,000 an acre for. They got a pretty good kick out of me saying acre for acre. But anyway, we ended up trading with Mubrin and forming Veritas Permian 2 and started a non-op strategy in primary the Delaware. And actually, as of 3 weeks ago, we were in the process of selling it to NOG, Northern Oil and Gas, which is the only public non-op company out there. We're selling that, and we're going to close next month. So anyway, now let's get to the important things. I mean, I need to share what God's blessed me with, because He's done it and I hadn't done it. And, you know, as a result of that, hopefully I'm going to talk about some things where God's used us to be in ministry and help different things. So, you know, so on the king, and I want to talk about some other things, but, you know, so where I am now, so Donna and I, you know, we live in Fort Worth, Texas. That's where my 3 kids, that's where Houston lives. We attend Christ Chapel, which is a non-denominational Baptist, non-denominational church. And so spent 25 years in Wichita Falls, and felt like God was leading us to Fort Worth. We had friends in Wichita Falls, but it was like going to the promised land. God's confirmed over and over, you know, that was the right decision for us. And so we go to Christ Chapel. I know you guys, some of you guys probably have Bible studies together and you have accountability. I've got 9 guys that I meet with every Tuesday. We call ourselves the Hogs, okay? The Feral Hogs. And so we meet every Tuesday. They were praying for me this morning. I got texts from them. And, you know, I can't tell you guys, you know, one, being in the church and having Christian brothers around you, if you don't have it, you need it. I don't know how people make it. And that's God's plan about us walking together and helping each other and being there for each other and that type of thing. So currently we go to Christ Chapel. Don and I both serve on the advisory board of Pathway to Victory, which if any of you watch First Baptist on Dallas on TV or on Fox, Robert Jeffress is the pastor there, and he was actually our pastor in Wichita Falls for 11 years. He and I have nothing in common. He is intellectual. I mean, he's smart. He reads for recreation. He doesn't golf, fish. Anyway. But we love the Lord, and we partner with Robert in that, and we're really involved with his Pathway to Victory, which I think is really been growing. It's one of the number 1 radio stations. His radio and television ministry. We're involved in DTS Seminary in Dallas. We're involved in dealings called Search Ministries. I don't know if you guys have a search guy here in Midland, but it's a marketplace ministry to reach the men. We're involved in that. We're involved with College Golf Fellowship. Me being a golfer, I have a lot of golf connections. Some of you guys know something about that. We're involved with First Liberty with Kelly Shackford. I know Kyle's involved with that. One of my guys in my Bible study, we have a deal called Leadership Lifters. We meet tomorrow. We meet once a month, and it's 20 to 35 young guys that we talk about faith-based leadership and how God can be a part of your business and how important that is. And so I'm also I just recently went on the Links Players Board, which back to my golf, it's a national organization that you kind of think, is this really an organization? But it basically ministers to country clubs. They have Bible studies in country clubs. So I have a little bit of a network in the golfing world, and so I'm trying to leverage my time or my network or my sphere, which is where I have it. And I was telling my friend Dale a while ago, I said, this friend of mine, we talk about things, and we're on the back nine of life, okay? Some of us are on the back nine. We don't know if we're putting out on 14 or 10 off on 17, but we're on the back nine. And I told Kyle and his board guys yesterday, Steve and some guys, that part of the reason up here is I want to finish strong. And I don't do this very often, but I wanted to come today and just tell you that God's blessed and He's been there. And so as I shared, I said, I do a Proverbs a day. There's a verse that was really important to me kind of in the middle of my career, and it really applies to everything. But for those that know Philippians 2, 3, and 4, it says, do nothing out of selfish ambition or vain conceit, rather in humility, value others above yourself, not looking to your own interests, but the interests of others. And so, in my part of my business of philosophy, I use this in business too. And it's like, if I'm going to do a deal with Grant, I see Grant sitting over here. I know I need to get. I'm for profit. I'm not nonprofit, so I'm out to make a profit. But this verse for a long time taught me that if I'm dealing with people, if I deal with Grant, and Grant feels like, for one, he's treated, treated right, and honestly, and he feels like he'll get a bad deal. He felt like he got a good deal, then he's going to come back. And, I'm going to get into a little bit later about, this, one of the keys of life is relationships. And so I do believe that, and that's a verse that I've used not only with my wife, with my kids, but in my business. And Houston's probably sick of hearing this, but you may want to close your ears. But I've tell my kids, I tell everybody, a lot of who you are is a result of who's around you. And God has taught me early to I know we have to go out and we're the salt and the light of the world, but, a lot of who you are is going to be who's around you. And God's taught me that early. Part of me being in First Baptist, I got around I got godly partners. I got mostly godly investors, a few anyway, but I'm not going to go anyway. But you can't control that. But I'm just saying, for me, it's really important who I'm around. And that makes, I've got these hogs that there's 9 of us. And we pray for each other. They keep me accountable, and so, that's something really important to me. Another little saying I have is, people don't care how much you know until they know how much you care. And that gets back to the relationship things this time, which I'm going to talk a little bit about. In business, going back to Proverbs 22:1 says, a good name is more desirable than great wealth. It takes a long time to build your reputation. It takes very little. It takes a deal or two to ruin your reputation. And so, you can't let pride get in the way. That's why you need to stay humble. You need to stay in the Word so you can, have that. And that's important. And then Proverbs 11:3 says, integrity is the upright guides them. So, one more proverb, 11:1 says, a false balance is an abomination to the Lord, but a just weight is in His delight. So being honest, being fair is very important. How am I doing on time, Kyle? Anyway, so the next one is, actually, I got another proverb. Sorry, guys. Humility, being humble. Remember your foundation. I got a buddy, now I get to play I played some of the best golf courses in the world. If you saw the place I grew up on, it's basically grown up now, but it was called Skyline Country Club. It was on a rock quarry. You had no irrigation, and about half the time you'd take a divot out of the dirt, you would chip your club because it was a rock. So we called it Skyrock. I'm a big nickname guy. If some of you guys were around me very long, you'd have a nickname. Kyle, you don't have one yet, but I used to could have meetings and talk nicknames and all the guys I know. But anyway, I'm getting off. But, now I'm really off. Anyway, we called it Skyrock, but we call it The Rock. And so now I got to play Pebble Beach a few weeks ago. I've got, I hate to admit where I played, but anyway, it's always, especially if I've got one buddy that grew up on the Rock, and when first thing we say, we walk down one or two fairways, just, man, this is a long ways from the Rock. So I think there's the Old Testament's, God was always reminding them of what He had done, and so, humility and having a foundation is really important. And one of the things that's really been important to me, and it's just something God gave me, is, and I'm all about servant leadership. And for you guys that are leaders, I went to a John Maxwell when I was a deacon in First Baptist Wichita Falls. John Maxwell, John Maxwell has some excellent material on servant leadership, and so I feel like that's what I've tried to model. And one of my goals is to see that everyone around me succeeds. So I want everyone around me to succeed, and that's part of that Philippians 2:3, looking out for the interests of others. But as a result of that, I'm gonna succeed if they probably, but that's not really my goal. It's more others focused, and so I like to see people around me succeed. And my gift is giving, and I've been involved with a lot of deals, with a lot of people, and I do this for that and that, and some people think I give away too much, but I think it's a different paradigm than what the world teaches. The world says go get all you can, as much as you can, run over whoever you want to run over, don't make any difference. But God has a different plan, and He's taught me that plan. I've done that plan, and He's blessed me, and in more ways than just financially. And the other thing I'd say is, on servant leadership, character is key to that. True leadership always begins with the inner person. Great character will create a great organization. Relationships, I'm going to talk a little bit more about that here at the end in a minute. Knowledge, you need to know before you try to lead. Intuition, this is a big one for me. And I think a lot of it is having a walk and being led by the Holy Spirit. Me as a person, I'm very conservative. I really don't like to gamble, even though a wildcat doesn't bother me. But I think that just the Holy Spirit, your intuition is God working through you and leading you. And back to my comment about if you're walking with Him and you're in the Word, your desires become His desires. And I think your intuition is His leading, is how I would put it. Experience, where you've been. To be a good servant leader, you've got to been places. And then lastly, past success, and to look at past success. What was success? Why did you succeed? Why did you fail? And, that's another way to be a servant leader. So there's 3 questions on your page. And one of them's about being a servant leader. And like I said, that's been a goal of mine. And, if I was to come in a room with you guys, I'm not a guy that comes in and takes over. I'm pretty quiet. But, I think that, and I was telling Kyle and the guys yesterday, when we were in the Barnett Shell, I had 17 employees. XTL's got hundreds of employees. And I'd tell them, say, look, guys and girls, I said, we're kicking their tail. When they got hundreds of employees, and I said, you guys are just killing it. So, anyway, on a servant leader, like I said, it's to look out for others and to see if those around you succeed. Then I want to go to relationships. What are the 2 keys to life? I think number one for me is relationship, and the relationship that really only matters is our relationship with Christ and knowing Him. I'm going to put out at some point at 18 here in the next few years. I don't know if it's tomorrow, if it's in 5 years. But, you've never seen a U-Haul, a hearse pulling a U-Haul, okay? What's important is knowing Jesus and growing in Him and loving people through Him. And that's through relationships. And you know, if you have that relationship, then you're going to be a better dad. You're going to be a better husband. You're going to be a better boss, or you're going to be a better employer. You're going to be a better partner. You're going to have those relationships. It's going to change the relationships of all of you guys. And so, to me, I mean, in business, it's relationships. It's life. It's relationships. I mean, like I said, Jesus is the main one, but you've got a wife. You got kids. You got grandkids. You got cousins. Anyway, relationships are key to life. And you know, Jesus is the answer to that. The other thing I would say is that if I could give anyone any advice, is just persevere. I mean, I've tried to share my story a little bit about the ups and downs, and there's a lot more. Probably didn't do a good enough job with the downs as I could have, but you know, like I said, Romans 8:28 says in all things, and I mean, all is a big word. And I think perseverance is something that sets people apart. And I mean, if you look at the life of Christ, he persevered, his disciples persevered. You know, James said in chapter 1, verse 2-4, consider it pure joy, my brothers and sisters, who ever face trials of many kinds, because you know the testing of your faith produces perseverance. And perseverance finishes the work that you may be complete and mature and lack of nothing. So, you know, I don't know where you guys are at. Maybe things are going great, maybe things are not, but I would challenge you to persevere, and that's what God's given me the grace and the favor to persevere. And then the last question is God's scripture relevant today? Man, I tell you, you know, I've been a believer since I was 54 years, and you know, if I could leave one word with you or one phrase with you guys, this is true. God's word's true. And I'm so embarrassed I didn't bring my Bible today, and I use my iPad. It drives me crazy. I don't like to use my iPad, but I do. But anyway, I left my Bible at home, and I've got a couple that have a lot of wrinkled pages. But you know, I know that His word is true, and that's what I'm up here to want to testify today. So anyway, thank you guys for having me. If I can answer any questions or whatever you want to do, Kyle, I'm open to whatever. So.